Hello there, my name is Jason Schmaltz and I'm an AMGA single pitch instructor, and today I'm going to talk about probably one of my favorite anchor systems, which is called the quad anchor. First part of this video, I want to show you how to tie this anchor, and then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about its uses, its pluses and minuses, and where you may want to avoid using it. First things first, tying it. So I have, for the example, to tie it with a 240 centimeter sling. So I'll take this sling and basically have it out like this and then fold it once over. So I've doubled it. Okay, basically doubled it like that. And I want to get this tab up in one of the corners. Doesn't matter, you pick which one. I have it in the right one. And then I'm going to take that corner with that tab. I'll go ahead and take one of the non-lockers that I'll eventually clip to the bolt station with it. And I'll use this to make basically an overhand knot like that. And I use the carabiner because it's just a little bit easier to dress well when you're kind of messing with 4 strands of material. I like to use carabiners, and then I'll do the other side as well. So I have this side, and I want to put another overhand on the other side. Okay, so I'll get a close up so you can see exactly how I'm tying this. So down, around, and through. Okay, pull that tight, and you can see that's pretty well dressed. Okay, so now I have a basically 4 strands with 2 overhands on each, or 1 overhand on each side, or I will clip that to my anchor station. And you can use non-lockers or lockers here. I like to use non-lockers because it's faster and lighter. But if you're going to do a party, a multiple person party on a top rope application where you're not going to be able to see this anchor for a while, you may want to make one or both of these into locking carabiners. The best application for a quad anchor system is 2 bolts. It will also work if you had something like a bolt in a tree, or a bolt and maybe like a mini trad anchor that was like 3 pieces, but basically you need 2 monolith anchors. If one of the bolts is weak, the trad anchor probably isn't going to be your best bet, and I'm going to show you why in a second. But this is the basic setup: is 2 solid bolts and then the quad coming down to the middle. Now when you go to set up a top rope application, a lot of times what's taught is to clip 3 of the 4 strands. So you clip a 3 to 1 type setup with opposing gates. Okay. The reason why this is bad is if this were to fail on one of the sides and you fail to the basically to the end of the anchor here, to the knot, you only have 1 strand that's keeping you from having catastrophic failure. So what we teach in our courses, and I think the typical way it's taught through AMGA, is to clip 2 of the strands, okay, in this manner. Okay, so 2 carabiners on the same 2 strands. Now I've seen some people teach it with 2 carabiners, opposing gates on independent strands like this. And the reason why that can be problematic is this is a self-equalizing anchor. Okay, so when the load shifts from side to side, the goal is that the weight stays roughly even between these 2 anchors. But when you have the carabiners on different strands like this, what can happen is you can shift to one side, and if there's any tension on the carabiners, they can bind right here. Here, get a close-up of that binding. See, they can bind right there. And so when the rope goes back to the center, do you see how it's loose on this side? I'll try to keep that binding. It's loose on this side and tight on this side. So now all the weight is diverted to 1 anchor. So that's not realizing the full benefit of the quad anchor. So 2 carabiners, opposing gates on the same 2 strands. And that way, now if I fail, I have 2 strands instead of 1, keeping me from catastrophic failure if one of the anchor points fails. And now, as the master point shifts due to people, as they're climbing, moving back and forth, or if I'm on this anchor with a clove hitch or something like that, leaning this way and my climber's leaning that way, this is free to kind of divvy out the weight equally amongst these anchors. Okay, so that's the main benefit of the quad. Now, one of the disadvantages of the quad anchor is where you get equalization, you get good equalization, you lose on extension. So you can see the way that I tie these overhand knots. If I fail here, I'm actually going to have quite a ways to extend, almost like 8 or 10 inches before the other anchor catches. So that's one of the disadvantages of this. There's 2 ways to kind of combat that. One way is, and probably the easiest way, is I can move these knots down. Okay, so I'll pull some material through. Okay. I'll move that knot down. And same here. I'll pull this material through and move that knot down. Okay. You can see now I have much less extension. I have maybe only like 3 inches here, and I have maybe, I don't know, 5 or 6 inches here. So that's a little bit better. Of course, there's a balancing act to this. If I want to utilize these master points, especially a multi-pitch scenario where I'm clipping people in to these different master points, then now I just made them a lot smaller. Okay, so it's hard to clip into, less real estate. The other thing is, if the route really wanders, or there's even a traverse maybe, this knot can, if it's too close to the anchors, can basically butt up against, if it's too close to the carabiners, it can basically butt up against the carabiner. And then when you butt up against the carabiner, if it keeps shifting, then one of the anchors becomes unloaded. So now you're only relying on one anchor versus getting the full benefit of both. So those things to keep in mind with the knot locations. In general, what I found is having roughly 5 or 6 inches on each side is pretty good. Another way to tie this anchor that reduces that amount of travel and also brings the anchor up some. You can see this anchor is pretty low for me. Like for me to clip into this, I'm going to be right here, if I'm on multi-pitch, and then now I'm belaying down here with my gree-gree, stuff like that, is to, instead of do a quad or a 4-strand quad, you can do what's called a 6-strand quad. Let me show you how you tie that. So a 6-strand quad is where, again, we start with a 240 centimeter sling. We fold it once, and then we come down here and get the strand again, and we fold it again. And then I try to pull it tight to equalize all these strands. And you can see I got the same kind of starting point as I had before. Only now I have 6 strands going across here. Okay, but that's okay. And I'll take my, now you definitely want to use your non-lockers to tie these overhands. And you definitely want to be a little bit more careful to not pull too much through. Again, I have my tab. Keep your tab on the end, outside of the overhand. Okay, so I got one side tied. Let's get a close-up of me tying this second overhand so you can see I got 6 strands. That's a lot of strands. Okay, so around and through, and you can see it's a lot of material to kind of manage, so you want to kind of tie it slow. Use that carabiner, pull all the strands tight. Okay, that's pretty good. And now I have my quad again. Only it's 6 strands here instead of 4. Okay, so I can hook that up. You can see I have my master points, 2 master points, just like the first quad, which we'll highlight in a minute a little bit more. And now instead of clipping 2 strands, I would clip 3 strands from my top rope. again, opposing gates. I would lock these down. And now you can see it's free to move. It's higher. Okay, so if I was going to clove in, now my clove would actually go up, up to the anchor, which is what I want. And my belay system would also be, if I was belaying with a gree-gree from the top, would be a little bit more ergonomic, right? And so that would help me belaying. It would also help the climber as they came up that they're not actually above the gree-gree when they arrive at the top. Okay, so that's helpful. So that's how you tie a 6-stranded quad, but most of this video is going to just show you the traditional 4-strand quad. But I just want to show you that trick. So if you're out climbing and the bolts are lower than what you want, that's a really good way to raise the master point up a little bit. And also shortens up these knots so there's not going to be as much extension, okay, if something fails. The other really good advantage for a quad is in a multi-pitch scenario, you actually have 2 master points, which I highlighted a little bit before, but I'll talk more about it now. And this is really great for multiple parties, but even a party of 2, just for every person to have their own master point. It's super nice. So if I'm climbing and I get to the top, I can clove into this master point, the first set of 2 strands, and I can grab any 2 strands I want. I normally try to like look up and try to make sure I'm not getting it like too tangled. Okay, and I can clove in, lock down, and then I have this other master point that I can dedicate to belaying. I can belay my partner up, and when they get to the top, they can clip right into this master point. So if I'm leaned over or to the side or whatever, and they're coming from this side, they can clip in their own way. And then even when we're on the ledge or whatever we're on, if there's a little bit of movement one way or another, we're not jolting each other around quite as much as a single master point anchor station. So it's really useful for multi-pitch. The other reason it's great for multi-pitch is if you know you're gonna have a multi-pitch route with multiple, even if it's not every anchor station, but most anchor stations are bolted, you can tie this quad once. Let me show you how nice this is. You can tie this quad once, and then you can take it with you as you climb, and you don't have to retie it. It just comes right off. I take one non-locker, I clip it to the other one, take the other one off, take this all in one. You see I have that non-locker clip to the other one. I wrap it up like this, just kind of twisting it. And you see I have that real twisted. Now watch. I bring those twists close together, clip that loop, bring that loop down. Look how tight that is. Put that right on my belt. When I get to the next anchor station, there's no fuss, there's no trying to tie more overhands or anything like that. I take this out, let it untwist naturally, clip on, and I can clove hitch right back in. How about that? I have my clove hitch already tied. That was nice. I don't really climb like that, but and now I'm ready to go again for the second time. The other thing is, if you're going to switch to rappelling, you can use this on rappel routes too that have 2 bolts. Same application. I think I have another video where I show multi-pitch rappelling where we just had 2 quads pre-built, and you could just go down the route so fast. Everybody has their own space and plenty of room to do the rope work, and it's really nice. So that's something to really consider for the quad. If you're using it, again, application has to be 2 solid bolts. If one of these bolts is loose, you need to do a different type of anchor where you kind of beef up the one that's not loose. But when the 2 bolts are solid, this is a great use for it. You can also tie the quad with, there's a Dyneema sling. You can tie it with nylon slings. You can tie it with cordelettes. I know a lot of people say like, oh, you're doing knots in a Dyneema sling, that makes it weaker. But in the quad anchor application, the quad is so strong and it's redundant squared. Let me explain what I mean by that. Not only do you have 2 anchor points that are sharing the load equally, but then you have double strands on each anchor point, okay? So what that results in is, even though the knots reduce the strength of the Dyneema by, let's say, a factor of 40%, okay? That's kind of been what some of the literature supports. So you go from maybe like a 24 kilonewton Dyneema sling to maybe like, I don't know, 15% or 15 kilonewtons, but then it's additive. Okay, so that you can add it back. Now it doesn't add exactly 1-to-1, but there is a video, I'll put a link in the description. It's by one of my YouTube competitors, but he does make pretty good videos. It's the How Not To guy. And he has some data where they test quad anchors and they figure out that a quad anchor, before it's been stressed, of course they beat it up and then they test it, it fails more, or it fails earlier, but they test it consistently. 40 kilonewtons has to be applied before this catastrophically fails. So if you generate 40 kilonewtons in a system, your body is going to be in half. Okay, so you definitely don't have to worry about that. So the point there is, you know, don't be afraid to use a Dyneema. My Dyneema sling compared to my cordelette is 1/3 of the weight. So I can carry 3 of these for 1 cordelette. So I'm definitely going to choose this over cordelette. Now, application for a cordelette might be if there's a sharp rock or something, where now the sheath of the cordelette is going to protect me a little bit more than a Dyneema sling. That might be a better application. But in general, if there's not a threat of, you know, cutting the anchor material itself, then I would say Dyneema is probably preferred. Lighter, less bulky, easier to tie, easier to manipulate than a cordelette or a nylon sling. Hey, I hope you liked that video on the quad anchor. If I left anything out that you might have thought of that would be helpful for people to know, let me know in the comments. If you had any further questions on some of the brake strength stuff or equalization, definitely let me know. I'll try to answer your questions. And really encourage you to use this. Make sure you're using it at the applicable time. But it's a great anchor. It's probably the most common one I use. I hope that you get to experience a lot of the benefits that I have of this anchor system. Hey, I'll see you out on the crag.